Hey everybody, welcome to Mad Backyard. Today we're going to be smoking a boneless ribeye roast. We're going to be smoking ours on our Pit Boss pellet grill, but you can follow along no matter what type of smoker you're using. We're going to show you how we season it overnight, set up the smoker, baste it with a garlic herb butter while it cooks, crank up the heat to get a perfect sear on the outside at the end, and how you can make sure to finish it at the perfect doneness every time. Let's go ahead and take a look at our ribeye roast. Today what I've got is a 4.5 pound boneless ribeye roast. And it's boneless because normally if we were doing a classic prime rib, there would be bones running up this side of the rib roast. And if you do a prime rib, that's what you would do. You'd have the bones, they'd either be on, and sometimes the butcher takes them off, then ties them back on for you to cook it, then you take them off when you're done cooking. The nice thing about doing a boneless ribeye roast is that we now have this side exposed, so we can add our seasoning and get smoked flavor and everything on all sides of the rib roast. You know, it's all the exact same meat as if we were doing a small prime rib. These are actually ribeye steaks if we were to cut them this way. Okay, we could probably get maybe 4 or 5 ribeye steaks out of this. But we're gonna do it as a whole roast today, and then we're gonna cut it just like a prime rib. So today we're doing boneless. They went and tied it too, and the nice thing is gonna help kind of hold its shape while it's cooking. So we're gonna go ahead and leave these ties on while we get it ready to cook. So we're gonna season our rib roast the night before because I wanna give the salt and seasoning plenty of time to work its way into the meat. It's just gonna help give it a little more flavor than putting the seasoning on right before we smoke it. So you don't have to use a binder if you don't want to. I like to use Worcestershire sauce on beef. I'm gonna go ahead and put a little Worcestershire sauce on the top side here. Just a thin coat to give us a little extra moisture to help the rub stick. We'll get some on the sides. And on the bottom side. And then for our rub, you want to keep it pretty simple with a rib roast and really kind of let the flavors of the meat shine through. We're going to be using Bad Byron's butt rub, and I know there's a picture of a pig on the front of this, but I primarily use it on beef. And the reason being because it has no sugar in it, and I really like using rubs that don't have a lot of sugar or any sugar at all when I'm doing beef, especially if I'm gonna do high heat later to sear it like we're gonna do on this rib roast. So the main ingredients in Bad Byron's butt rub are salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, paprika, and a little bit of chipotle powder as well. So they're all flavors that are gonna work really, really well on our rib roast. Now that we got the rib roast fully seasoned, we're gonna go ahead and take the wire rack and baking sheet combo here and put the whole thing back in the refrigerator. Let that seasoning really work its way into the meat overnight and get it nice and well seasoned before we put it on the smoker tomorrow.
The next day, set your smoker to 250 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're smoking on a pellet grill like we are, make sure you've got plenty of pellets in the hopper for the high heat sear at the end. We'll be using some almond Cabernet pellets from Knotty Wood because we really like the flavor with beef. We'll also be setting up a small firebox with some hickory wood chunks for extra smoke flavor. This is actually really easy to do, and we made a video showing you step by step how to set it up to get a lot more real wood smoke flavor on a pellet grill. I'll put a link to that video down in the description below.
All right guys, I'm so excited. We got a beautiful crisp fall day. We got a rib roast ready to go on the smoker, and we're celebrating my birthday this weekend. So if anyone's ever racking their brain for what to get me for my birthday, 4.5 pounds of prime rib will work just fine. Makes a great stocking stuffer too. We're gonna go ahead and get a meat probe in the rib roast before we put it on. So if you wanna come in and take a look here, we're gonna kind of come in from the side. You wanna make sure whether you're using a meter like this is a wireless probe thermometer, or a wired thermometer or whatever you have, you wanna make sure you're getting right in the center. And I'm gonna go from the side. And what I want to do here is so that it makes sure I don't overshoot it by putting it in too far and kind of getting off center or not far enough and ending right there. I'm going to kind of look from the top, where's the center? And then I'm going to take my fingers and put them right in that spot there, okay? So that way when I come down to the side here and put it right through the center of the rib roast, I can just go straight in right to where my fingers are, and I know I can stop right there, and I know that that tip of that probe is right in the center of our roast here. Okay, so we got that on. We've had this sitting on the counter for about an hour and a half, just to kind of let it come down in temperature a little bit before we put it on the smoker, and let's go ahead and get it on. I'm gonna place it on the Pit Boss pellet grill here, facing this way. And depending what kind of smoker you're using, you're gonna do it a little differently, but The heat on mine generally comes from left to right, hotter on this side, cooler on this side. So I want this tapered end down here to be kind of facing to the right, at least to start. We may rotate it and flip it and stuff as we go, but I don't want that little part to be bearing the brunt of the heat right away when we put it on. So I'm just gonna put it over on the right side of my grill here. We got the smoker box going with the hickory chunks. That smoke's gonna kind of go over the rib roast, out the exhaust chimney here, so everything's kind of moving in this direction the way we want it to. And I'm gonna keep it right here on the rack over the baking sheet so we can collect our drippings as it's cooking. And we're just gonna let this guy get started and check back on it in a little bit. All right, now that we've got our meter put into the roast, we're gonna go ahead and set up our cook here. So we do tap, set up to cook. Gonna pick beef, and then a roast, and then we want prime rib. Yeah, it's a boneless ribeye roast, but it's gonna be cooked pretty much the same as prime rib. This has all our temperature gradings right here, so we're gonna pick medium rare, which is how I like my prime rib or ribeye roast. It's kind of the best way to cook it in my opinion, but you can choose what you like. 135 is gonna be the final temperature, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. We're not gonna leave it on until it gets to 135, but that's gonna be our final temperature it's telling us for medium rare on a prime rib. So now we're gonna go ahead and hit start cook. So now we got our internal temperature, 44 degrees. We got a little ways to go, but we're gonna keep an eye on it as it's cooking here. Let's talk a little bit about internal temperature and how we get our rib roast to the perfect final doneness. I want this rib roast to get to a perfect medium rare. So that's gonna be between 130 and 135 degrees Fahrenheit internally. Now that's the very final temperature we want this ribeye roast to be at when it finally stops rising in temperature. So you can equate it a little bit to driving a car and trying to slow down before you get to a stoplight. If you wait to hit the brakes until you're right at that stoplight, you're gonna blow past the intersection and it's gonna be a disaster. The same is true if you wait to take your roast off the smoker right when it gets to that final temperature. It's the same as stopping right at the intersection and blowing past it. You're gonna end up into medium well territory for sure. The outside of the ribeye roast is gonna be hotter than the center, so as that heat diffuses from the outside in, our center keeps rising in temperature as the roast rests, even though we've taken it off the smoker. So resting the meat is the same as gently applying the brakes and slowing down the car and trying to come to a perfect stop right at that intersection. In our case, a perfect medium rare. So we're gonna smoke the ribeye roast to about 110 to 115 degrees. Then we're gonna turn up the temperature on our smoker to get a nice browning and searing on the outside. Then we'll put it back onto sear, and as that temperature keeps rising, we'll watch it closely. And as soon as it gets to about 122 to 125, that's when we want to remove it from the smoker so that it'll keep rising in temperature and land perfectly in that 130 to 135 degree range while it's resting. We're gonna go ahead and make a quick and easy garlic butter and herb mixture to baste on the ribeye roast while it's smoking. So we got a stick of salted butter, about a tablespoon or 3 cloves of minced garlic, teaspoon of fresh chopped rosemary, and a teaspoon of fresh chopped thyme. So we're gonna go ahead and add our butter. We're gonna let this melt down, and then we'll add the garlic and herbs. Once the butter's melted, we're gonna turn this down to low heat. Whisk these in. And I'm gonna let this sit on real low heat on this burner, just so the garlic and herb flavors can really infuse into all that butter. And we're gonna let the ribeye roast smoke for about an hour before we start basting it on. We wanna develop a little bit of a crust on the outside of the rib roast before we start basting it, or else we're just gonna end up rubbing all our seasoning off. So just let this sit and get happy, and we'll start basting it here in a little while. It's been about an hour since we put the ribeye roast on. You can see that our seasoning here is setting up a little bit, so we can go ahead and start basting it with the garlic and herb butter mixture. Just gonna kind of I'm gonna go ahead and rotate it at this point, just so we're making sure we're cooking evenly. We're only up to about 65 degrees internally, so we still got a little ways to go. So I'm just gonna turn it around this way. A little more garlic butter on the side here too. And then we'll come back in a little bit and put a little more on. We're also gonna make an au jus while the ribeye roast is smoking. This is a super simple sauce to make, but really goes a long way in adding to that final finished presentation once the ribeye roast is finished and you've got it on the plate. So we're gonna start off with 2 cups of beef broth, and I've got a saucepan here on medium heat. I'm just gonna pour this in. 2 cups beef broth, beef stock. You can use bone broth. I really like bone broth for sauces and things like that. We got a cup of red wine, and you can use whatever kind of red wine you like. We got 2 tablespoons of butter, and then we've got a pinch of freshly ground pepper and a pinch of rubbed sage we're gonna put in as our herbs and seasonings, and then we have a sprig of fresh rosemary. We're gonna strain this before we're done, so we can just go ahead and throw the whole sprig in there. We're gonna kind of stir it around, let the heat come up, let that butter melt, and we're gonna bring this up to a boil. Once this is up to a boil, we're gonna reduce the heat down to medium-low, and we're gonna let it simmer for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then remove it from the heat and just let it sit and let those flavors kind of meld together while the ribeye roast finishes smoking, and then we'll warm it back up later when it's time to serve. We're right at the 3-hour mark on our 4.5-pound ribeye roast. We're about to hit 110 degrees. You can see we're actually at 109 on the meter here. Our target's 135. It's telling us there's another hour and 7 minutes to go. Now, if we just left it right on the smoker as it is, yes, it would take this long, and this includes the rest time too. I learned that after using the meter for a little bit, but so that includes the rest time, and you're welcome to just leave it on and keep smoking it at the current temperature, but we're actually gonna sear ours. So what we're gonna do is as soon as it hits 110 degrees, we're gonna take it off our pit boss and turn the temperature up to as high as it'll go. Now on our Pit Boss Pro Series 1150, it'll get up to about 500 degrees or so. I know that on this model, it's gonna take a good 15-20 minutes to get up that high. So in the meantime, we're gonna take it off, let it rest. Okay, I'm not gonna cover it with aluminum foil or anything like that, just gonna let it rest out in the open, and then we're gonna turn our heat up, let that temperature come up, and then put it back in. Now, we're taking it off at 110 degrees because I know that it'll rise at least another 5 degrees while it's resting and while I'm waiting for the pellet grill to come up in temperature. If you've got a setup where you can just take the ribeye roast and put it right on top of some hot coals, or move it to your oven set to the high as 500 degrees or as high as it'll go, you can wait till it gets to 115 and then just do it right away. Since I know it's gonna come up to 115 on its own while I'm waiting for my pellet grill to come up in temperature, that's why I'm taking it off at 110. So pellet grill, take it off at 110. Anything else, gas grill, whatever the case may be, hot charcoals, take it off at 115. And if you want it a little more done than medium rare, like if you want it medium, and remember that's gonna be medium in the center, so your sides are really gonna be more like medium well, just add 5 degrees to everything I'm saying today. All right, so let's go ahead and check our temperature again. And you can see we're at 110 degrees now, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and get this guy off. Let's take a look at it here. We're just gonna leave the meter right in it where it's at. And then we're gonna come on back over to our control panel and turn this up to high. So the highest temperature on a Pit Boss is 450 technically, but if you turn it up to high, this is if you're using a Pit Boss, if you turn it up to high, you'll get up closer to 500. I've also found that if you set it to 450, it'll take forever to get up there, versus for some reason, if you set it to high, it'll just come up, even if you're going for 450, it'll come up a lot faster. So I'm gonna set it to high, and then we're just gonna wait for that temperature to come up while the roast rests, and then we'll put it back on. Make sure you've also got plenty of pellets in your hopper. If you are using a pellet grill, when you turn it up to 450, 500 degrees, it'll start going through pellets really fast. So make sure you've got enough so you don't run out in the middle of your cook. We're up to 485 degrees Fahrenheit on my pellet grill. That's close enough for me. The ribeye roast has actually risen to 117 while it's been resting here, so it's gone up another 7 degrees. So we're gonna go ahead and get it on. Get this lid closed to keep all our heat in. And we're just gonna watch it really, really close because we wanna take it off when that temperature hits between 122 to 125, knowing that it'll rise up into that 130 to 135 range while it's resting.
Searing at around 500 degrees with indirect heat, it'll take anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, depending on the size of your roast, to get it the rest of the way up to temperature. Ours took about 15 minutes to reach an internal temperature of 123 degrees Fahrenheit. Take the roast off the heat, let it rest for about 30 minutes before you slice into it. The internal temperature should rise the rest of the way to land between 130 to 135 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a perfect medium rare. While you're waiting, you can strain the au jus we made earlier and warm it back up on the stove. After 30 minutes, transfer the roast to a cutting board to slice, and add the drippings from the pan to the au jus.
Okay, it's been about 35 minutes and the ribeye roast is rested and come up to our perfect temperature range, right between 130 and 135 degrees. So we stopped the car, landed the plane, whatever analogy you want to use, right where we wanted it, by really keeping a close eye on our temperatures. I'll put a link to the meter down in the description if you want to check it out, but you don't want to waste your money on a good ribeye roast without using a good thermometer as well to really make sure you get it to the correct doneness. So we've got our jus here. We're gonna go ahead and take our jus. You can see that we added the drippings and some of that fat has accumulated at the top. If you wanna just whisk it in there and leave it as is, that's fine. I like to separate it out. You can get a little fat separator like this and hold your thumb over the opening if you don't have a stopper for it and just pour it in enough to cover that little spout there. I'm just going to do the whole thing. And just give it a minute or two here to let that fat come back up to the top. And you can pour it from the bottom without getting all that fat on your plate too. So just an option if you want to use that. So we've got our ribeye roast here. So you can see by searing it at the end, we got this nice crispy crust on the outside, a lot of that fat rendered and kind of mixed with our seasoning and our garlic and our butter and just made this nice crispy exterior. So hopefully we got the best of both worlds by smoking in the beginning and then searing at the end. We're gonna go ahead and cut these off. And before I slice it open, I just want to show you guys all this juiciness and fat render on the side here. You can just see, I mean, that's why ribeye roast, it's the king of roasts, you know. Maybe beef tenderloin would give it a run for its money, but that's like, you know, arguing between ribeyes and filet mignon. You could argue all day, but you know, it doesn't get much better than this. So let's go ahead and slice down the middle and see how we did. Make sure you got a good meat slicing knife for this so you don't tear it up. You want to get a nice sharp slice right down the middle. Look at that beautiful, beautiful roast. Let's go ahead and take a bite and see how we did. And just falling apart. Can't forget the jus. Pour a little bit of jus on here. Take a little bit of this edge. Happy birthday to me. This is so freaking good. It's got salt, pepper, garlic, beefiness. It's got great acidity from that jus we made. Just that little bit of red wine makes a big difference. Get a little more jus on this bite. Perfectly tender, perfectly cooked the way I like it. We hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons if you want to get more content like this from our channel. I'll put a link to the full recipe at madbackyard.com, as well as links to all the products we used today down in the description below. I'll also put links to 2 potato recipes that go great with smoked ribeye roast, Fleming's Copycat Potatoes and Potatoes and Onions, down in the description below. Thanks for watching. We're gonna show you how we season it overnight, set up the smoker, wait for the car to pass by, and how you can make sure to finish it at the perfect doneness every time. So stay tuned.